Inspiring twist, billionaire CEO discovers his firing of mom forced daughter to sell bike for food. David Miller stood in his sleek, chrome office overlooking Silicon Valley. He was a titan, a man who built empires from the ground up, yet at that moment, there was a nagging sensation twisting inside him. All the digits on his bank balance, all the accolades on the wall, seemed meaningless as he prepared to terminate Ruth, a longtime employee. He had rationalized it, of course. The quarterly report showed dips in revenue, and cutting costs was essential. But couldn't he have found another way? A sour knot clenched at his stomach like an iron shackle as he pressed the button on his intercom. "Lucy, please send in Ruth." Ruth entered, her familiar face tinged with confusion. For a brief moment, David hesitated, finding himself staring into her weary eyes. There was warmth there, a flicker of recognition that sent a bolt of electricity through him. But success had numbed his empathy, tarnished those family ties he'd long dismissed in favor of profit margins. With a curt nod, he delivered the news, feeling an abstraction settle over him, the comforting cloud of the CEO eclipsing the sun within. Still, the fleeting look of disappointment on her face burrowed into his mind. He waved her off, yet her presence lingered like a shadow, whispering doubts that gnawed at his determination. In the days that followed, the guilt settled in a heavy cloak that he couldn't shrug off. Media buzz and company emails flickered by as he immersed himself in tasks to drown out the unease. Yet, whispers of discontent among employees gnawed at him. Were they upset about the layoffs? Or was it more personal? He found himself returning to old emails, reminiscing about family dinners that dwindled as ambition reprioritized his life. The feeling that something was deeply amiss plagued him, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The riddle of his life's inadequacy spiraled as he scrolled through his phone, only to find an old photo of Ruth, her hands grease-stained and joyful, teaching neighborhood kids how to fix bikes. A surge of emotions crashed over him, but instead of clarity, he felt drowning waves of regret. The bike, the very symbol of their youthful connection, wasn't just a contraption made of wheels. It now represented the distance he'd created, and each rib of the frame seemed to echo his lost childhood. His heart raced as he realized just how profoundly he'd affected her life. Ruth was struggling, and she had become a stranger in the wake of his success. Memories of family dinners began to intertwine with the image of a vulnerable mother, fighting to provide for Emily, David's only niece, now selling her bike to make ends meet. The realization struck hard. Ruth wasn't just a casualty, Emily was suffering too, and David felt the ugly throb of a guilt he couldn't shake. Just as the urgency served to eclipse his spiraling thoughts, the phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice trembled like a thread holding his reality together. "Can you help us, Uncle David?" There was desperation there, an innocence twisted by weariness. David's mind raced, wrestling with fear and remorse, wondering if the road to redemption could still be carved. Would he summon the courage to reach out, or had he burned his last bridge? As he contemplated, an unsettling stillness settled around him, marking the precipice of a life-changing moment. David's heart pounded as he listened to the silence that followed Emily's plea. Her voice was a fragile echo of the bond they once shared, a bond he had almost forgotten in the pursuit of wealth and power. The realization that he could wield his influence to restore not just the lost connection but also the dignity of his family pressed heavily on him. Suddenly, he felt not only like a billionaire but a man responsible for the well-being of those he loved. He closed his eyes, envisioning Ruth's weary face, the lines etched with worry and fatigue. They had all suffered from David's relentless ambition, but the weight of that truth felt especially heavy now. Compelled by an intensity he hadn't felt in years, he made a choice. He would act, not just to save Ruth, but to reconnect with the pieces of himself he had abandoned. Making his way back through the hallways of his glass fortress, he found himself looking at his employees differently. They were no longer faceless beings pushing numbers and spreadsheets. Each face held a rich tapestry of stories and dreams, interconnected to his own. The walls of his empire began to feel less like protection and more like a prison, isolating him from the human experiences beyond profits and losses. With a newfound urgency, David called an emergency meeting with his board. "We need to revise our current strategy," he announced, his voice firm, cutting through the air like a blade. The raised eyebrows and murmurs of doubt didn't deter him. He had experienced enough personal dread to know change was only born from discomfort. "Our focus has shifted too far from our core values. We are going to invest not only in our technology but also in our people." The room fell silent, each member grappling with the implications of his statement. The reports on their desks reflected layoffs as correct strategic maneuvers, yet David saw them differently now. Each statistic represented a life altered, a family struggling. He continued, fueled by a mix of righteousness and desperation, "I want to launch a program that directly supports our staff in times of need." The murmurs grew louder, skepticism swirling in the air. "Wouldn't that cost more?" One board member ventured, projecting the fiscal stakes like a shield against David's resolve. "Cost is secondary," David argued, feeling a fire ignite within him. "Rebuilding trust is imperative. Our growth depends on a satisfied, motivated team. If we lose sight of that, we lose everything. I fired Ruth for profit margins, and I lost part of my humanity in the process. But I can't let that define me anymore." The board remained divided, unable to catch his vision of a compassionate, value-driven business. He couldn't help but feel the isolation closing in again, but something inside him urged him forward. He needed to take meaningful action, one that would ripple beyond the boardroom. After the meeting, David determined that he would visit Ruth. He'd offer her not just an apology, but a chance for a fresh start, perhaps even a position back at the company aligned with initiatives meant to enrich their employees' lives. He thought of Emily, of how he could help them both together, perhaps even helping Ruth revive her passion for fixing bikes in a community program he would spearhead. As he exited his office building, the sky was a canvas painted in orange and purple hues, mirroring the conflict vibrant within him. He was standing on a precipice between his past mistakes and a potential future intertwined with forgiveness and growth. David felt determined, yet the unease of what lay ahead remained omnipresent. Would Ruth accept his overtures, or had he waited too long? Driving towards his sister's home, doubt crept in, a whisper of fear urging him to turn back. He could almost hear it taunting, reminding him that redemption is fraught with risks. But David knew he couldn't return to life as usual. This journey wasn't merely about saving someone else, it was about reconstructing himself. With each passing moment, he grappled with a daunting realization, the realization that the time had come to face the consequences of his decisions head-on, and only then would he discover what kind of man he truly wanted to be. As he turned the key in the ignition of the car, the finality hit him hard. The moment had arrived for David to confront the ghosts of his actions. Would he find the courage he needed? Would love be enough to bridge the chasm he created, or would he fall short once again? As he approached Ruth's door, a wave of uncertainty coursed through him. A single, fiercely hopeful question pulsated in his mind: could he truly reclaim the family ties he had sacrificed? David's hand trembled as he paused before Ruth's door. The intricate wood grain felt foreign beneath his fingers, a barrier he had raised between them that had now become palpable and impenetrable. It was more than just the physical door, it was a metaphor for the years of silent resentment and missed connections that had built a wall around their relationship. He inhaled deeply, steeling himself for what was to come. With a decisive motion, he knocked. The sound resonated through the air, a harbinger of change, or perhaps a final drumroll for a future he could no longer predict. He could picture Ruth's reaction, surprise mixed with a tinge of skepticism, perhaps even bitterness. A part of him wanted to run, to drive far away and bury himself in the productivity of his enterprises. But that wasn't who he wanted to be anymore. The door opened slowly, revealing Ruth, her eyes widening with a flicker of recognition. She appeared older than he remembered, lines of stress framing her expression, yet there was a steadfast fire burning underneath. This was not the meek woman he had dismissed in his pursuit of success, this was Ruth, resilient and forged in the flames of hardship. "David," she said, and with that single word, a cascade of memories flooded in, both sweet and weighted with regret. He searched her face for forgiveness but found only caution. "I know I've hurt you," he began, fighting against the knot that tightened in his throat. "And I have no excuse. I came to apologize not just for firing you, but for the way I've chosen to live my life." "Your life?" she interjected, the sharpness of her voice cutting through the air. "You mean the life that cost me my job and shattered our family? It's great that you're realizing this, but it doesn't change what's already happened." David nodded, fully aware of the gravity of her words. The bitterness in her tone stung, but he deserved it. "I know. I know I can't erase the past. All I can do is try to make it better for the future, and that begins with you." He took a deep breath, forming his next words with care. "I want to offer you a position back at the company." A look of disbelief overtook her features, quickly replaced by defiance. "You think after everything, I would go back there? To a place where I was discarded like an obsolete part of a machine?" "No," David replied, his urgency rising. "I need you in a different capacity. I want to create a program for our employees that prioritizes their welfare. A place to assist them in crises. I want you to lead it. You've always had this spark for connecting with people. I need that. We need that." They stood in silence, the possibility of a glimmer of hope hanging between them like a fragile thread. David watched the struggle play out on her face, the temptation to forgive, yet the weight of unhealed wounds pulling her back. "This is riskier than you understand," Ruth finally stated, her voice now softened, the edge dulled by consideration. "You've built a world that doesn't value people, and now you want to change it. You've got a lot of convincing to do." "I know," he replied, feeling a sense of urgency swell in his heart. "But I'm ready. For the first time, I want to build something worthwhile, something that truly connects us." The vulnerability in his confession seemed to momentarily disarm her defenses. Yet just as quickly, a wave of skepticism returned, urging her to retreat into her doubts. "You've burned bridges, David. People don't just forget." "I can't bring back time," he said, desperation filling his voice. "But I can build new bridges. Would you help me, Ruth? Please?" Forcing her to grapple with his request, he shifted his weight, sensing her reluctant contemplation. Thoughts raced in his mind. He had already set in motion a plan to confront the company's leadership about a new ethics-focused direction. Yet what if he failed? What if she turned him down? As the silence stretched, he felt the weight of their shared history pressing heavily between them, the stakes rising with every passing second. Would this be the moment that could shape their futures? Would it inspire the change he envisioned? Closing his eyes for a heartbeat, he steeled himself for any answer, knowing this exchange was just the beginning of his journey toward healing, not just for Ruth, but for himself. And then she spoke, her voice laced with cautious hope. "What do you truly plan to do, David?" In that critical moment, he realized he was not just fighting for Ruth, but for the core of who he wanted to become. The rebirth of a path he could choose together with those he had hurt, yet still could inspire. As he prepared to articulate his vision, a sudden clarity washed over him. The real work was about to begin, and it would demand every ounce of courage he could muster. But a new revelation tugged at him, brushing through the edges of his consciousness. Was this initiative truly meant to empower others, or was it also a means to regain his own sense of purpose? As his thoughts spiraled into the potential implications of this truth, David understood all too well that he was standing at a crossroads, not just with Ruth, but with himself as well. What would he find on the other side of this endeavor? Would he truly be able to stitch the fabric of their lives back together again, or would it unravel farther than before? He was ready to find out. David took a steadying breath, gathering his thoughts as he faced Ruth. The weight of his past decisions pressed on him like a physical burden, but in this moment, he knew he had a choice, to confront it head-on or allow it to paralyze him once more. "I plan to get the board on board, pun intended," he said, attempting to inject a lightness to the gravity of their discussion. "No more putting profits above people. We'll introduce mental health programs, flexible hours for those who need it, and training sessions that center around empathy and collaboration." Ruth remained skeptical, her brows knitted in concentration. "And you think the board will buy into that? After what they've seen you prioritize?" "I have to convince them, and more importantly, I have to convince myself that this is possible," he replied, his voice firm with an undercurrent of desperation. "I've spent too long dodging reality. I need to lead by example now." The word lead stirred something inside David. He had always been inclined to delegate tasks, to manage from a safe distance, but this wouldn't be about managing. This would be about leading, about actively engaging with the lives that had been so easily swept aside. "What if they reject it?" Ruth asked, probing deeper than his surface-level aspirations. "What if they scoff at your idealism?" He could feel her challenge pinpointing his fears. Would corporate culture really be willing to sacrifice gains for well-being? He pictured the faces of board members, eyes glazed as they listened to financial forecasts while ignoring the pulse of their workforce. "If they do," he said slowly, "then I have to make the choice. I will take full responsibility for those decisions, but I can't go back to the old ways." Their eyes locked, and in that silent space, David sensed a fragile connection forming, tethered to the shards of their shared history. "David, I can't trust that just because you feel these things now, everything is going to change," Ruth replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You need to show that you're committed not just to me or the vision, but to the people you've wronged over the years. You've got to understand the lost value of those lives behind the names on the payroll." His heart raced as her words sank in. He felt a profound awakening of guilt and responsibility. This was more than just Ruth, it extended to everyone who'd been affected by his decisions. "What do I need to do?" he asked, every bit of bravado slipping away as he asked the question of someone who was desperate for guidance. "Start by reaching out to the employees you've affected directly. Listen to them, acknowledge their grievances, and be prepared for uncomfortable discussions. Transparency is everything. If you truly want to build bridges, you've got to show the scars first." The enormity of what she suggested hit him like a wave. Facing not just the board, but the individuals whose lives had been impacted by his choices, was daunting. But he understood that change could not be built on a hollow apology or a fleeting idea. This was his chance to engage in a tangible act of amends, to put himself in the line of fire for whatever vulnerability they might hurl his way. "I can do that," he replied, a newfound determination resounding in his voice. "It might not be easy, but it's necessary. I need to take ownership not just of the company, but of my failures." As Ruth processed his words, a flicker of hope danced in her expression, a glimmer of what might be if he faced those individuals with sincerity. "Fine, but if you really mean this, then I'll be there to help," she conceded. "However, I won't sugarcoat things, and you'll hear plenty of the hard truths." A rush of gratitude surged within David, the prospect of working alongside Ruth reigniting a purpose that had long felt extinguished. In this journey, he needed her honesty, her authenticity to ground him. That he nodded, suddenly aware that he stood not just at a professional crossroads, but at the precipice of personal growth, confronting the parts of himself he had avoided. As they discussed their next steps, a thought echoed in David's mind. This was just the beginning. He envisioned the kind of culture he wanted to foster, a space of openness and accountability, but questioned whether he had the fortitude to not just initiate change but also withstand the fallout. What if the pain of confronting his past was far more than he anticipated? And in this endeavor to rebuild, how many skeletons from his past would he have to face? The fire ignited within him, he was finally willing to follow through. But as they continued their conversation, the weight of uncertainty loomed over David like a dark cloud, pressing him to question whether he was truly prepared for the storm ahead. Would he engage effectively, learning and growing from this initiative, or would the backlash from his confrontation scatter his plans before they even started? The answers lay ahead, just out of reach. David sat at his desk, a whirlpool of thoughts swirling in his mind as he prepared to confront the reality ahead. The horizon of corporate change lay before him, but the unfamiliarity of this territory sent ripples of doubt through his veins. He visualized the employees he would need to approach, faces of disappointment, anger, perhaps even a flicker of hope. Each name pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing him deeper into the web of his responsibilities. He pulled up his emails, scanning through the names of those he had let down. Each employee marked by numbers and statistics transformed into real people with their own stories, griefs, and aspirations. The weight of guilt surged as he recalled their lack of job security and the toxicity that had permeated the workplace culture he had once fostered. A fire ignited within, along with the stark realization that this wasn't just a networking opportunity, it was personal. Each conversation would mean peeling back the layers of his past mistakes. Ruth had advised him to listen, and as soon as he set foot in the break room filled with familiar faces, he could feel the tension hanging in the air. He cleared his throat, the words stuck momentarily. "I want to talk," he finally said, his voice almost a whisper, a departure from the authoritative tone that had become second nature. That he noticed the startled expressions around the room. The hard stares, the frowns, fear mingled with cautious curiosity. "I need to hear you. I want to understand how the changes I made impacted you." An employee finally spoke up, a woman named Laura, her finger gripping the edge of the table like it was a lifeline. "You don't think we already know what this is about? You made decisions that cut us out completely. Our stress levels were disregarded, and now you want to play savior." Though her words hit him like a blow, he kept his gaze steady. "I deserve that, every bit of it. I want to understand your experiences. Not to defend my past actions but to be better moving forward. I need your help to create a space we can feel safe in." Silence enveloped them. The clock ticked, an agonizing reminder of time lost and the many moments he had allowed fear to silence these voices. Another employee, Mark, joined the conversation. "What is stopping you from just doing what is good for the company from now on? Why do you want to engage us now? You didn't care before." The fire inside him flickered. Had he just opened Pandora's box? How could he alight the flames of trust they never had in him? "Because I have time to reflect. I understand now that I was blinded by profits rather than the people sustaining them. I lost sight of the impact of our choices on your lives. I am willing to listen and learn," he said, the sincerity coursing through him. The choice to act without pretense became even clearer. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, the doubt battling with a hint of cautious optimism. "What if you chose to make a difference, starting from this room?" Laura pressed on, her tone both defiant and hopeful. "But it's gotta be real, not just some PR tactic. I understand. Transparency, from me and from all of us. Can we actually start a dialogue?" David felt a subtle shift. "And if that means owning up to my past failures, so be it. Change won't be easy, and I can't expect to redeem every apology. But I owe it to each of you to try." More voices began to echo in the room, a soft rumble of agreement, tempered with skepticism. They offered snippets of their experiences, their frustrations simmering on the surface, and he felt as if he was finally scratching away at the crust that had hardened around their relationship. The questioning of his motives lingered, but each shared grievance chipped away at the walls he had built. David began to understand that genuine leadership required vulnerability. This was not merely a transaction, it was an ongoing transformation and evolution he had to commit to, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths. As the conversation continued, David realized that he was not merely there to listen, he was beginning to discover parts of himself that had long lain dormant. His empathy began transforming into a collective responsibility. Could he really shoulder the burden of leading a company while dismantling the very structure that had upheld his previous mistakes? Yet just as the dialogue took a turn for the positive, doubt lingered. What additional truths might emerge that would reveal the cracks in this plan? As he felt the weight of their stories wash over him, he couldn't shake the nagging thought: how many more painful lessons awaited him in this redemptive journey? There were still scars to be uncovered, and with every truth surfaced, the challenges to his commitment loomed larger. Would they trust him enough to keep going, or would he falter at the threshold of honesty? As conversations heated, David understood that this newfound openness was just the beginning of his reckoning. David emerged from the break room with a knot in his stomach. The flicker of hope he'd seen in Laura's eyes lingered, but he questioned whether he could keep that ember alive or if it would extinguish under the weight of confrontation that lay ahead. Each employee's story replayed in his mind like a vivid montage of regret, but something deeper brewed below the surface. He knew this was not merely about responding to their grievances, it was about redefining himself as a leader, perhaps even as a man. That he found himself at his desk, staring at the screen but not registering any of the reports or proposals shining back at him. The world outside his office, the usual buzz of productivity and urgency, felt like a distant hum, a reminder of what he had to lose. To truly transform, he could no longer keep himself cocooned within the safety of executive decisions. He had to engage at a level that truly mattered. That he recalled Ruth's earlier words, "Leadership isn't about creating followers, it's about inspiring change." The phrase hung heavy in his mind, morphing into a challenge. Could he be bold enough to innovate under such scrutiny? The thought seemed daunting. Realizing he needed to establish a roadmap for this transformation, he jotted down his thoughts. First, he needed to facilitate monthly open forums to encourage dialogue, a mechanism that fostered accountability. This would give employees a direct channel to express concerns and suggestions. Next, he wanted to implement wellness initiatives to directly address the toxicity they'd experienced, demonstrating a commitment to their well-being. With his heart pounding, he considered the real test ahead. He needed to present these ideas to the employees, risk their skepticism, and bear the weight of their expectations. The fear of failure gripped him, but this was the cost of change. Every moment he spent drowning in the past only reinforced his corporate silence, an environment that had suffocated voices of dissent and creativity. A tentative knock on his office door pulled him from his reverie. It was Laura again, the grit in her expression signaling she had more on her mind than before. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady yet inquisitive. "Of course," he replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. Intrigued yet anxious, he leaned forward. "I've been thinking," she began, "there's a lot of uncertainty swirling right now. You can't just promise change, you need to show us evidence that this isn't another empty corporate promise. How will we know it's different?" David nodded, appreciating her forthrightness. "I plan to initiate regular forums for communication. I want you and everyone else to engage openly. Transparency will become a priority. No more hiding decisions behind closed doors. Words are one thing, David. Actions speak louder." Her boldness stung, but in that moment, it also became a catalyst for clarity. Laura was right. If he intended to lead by example, he had to act decisively and allow for genuine accountability, not just for the employees but for himself. "I understand. If you redefine what it means to trust me, I will be vulnerable. Together, we can forge a workplace that feels different, one where everyone feels heard," he affirmed, aware of the stakes involved. As the conversation began to flow, David felt the cracks in his self-doubt widen, letting in fresh currents of resolve. He grasped that moving forward meant inviting not only critique but collaboration, the very heart of his rediscovery as a leader. "Trust is earned, not given," Laura said, the piercing honesty in her tone both grounding and alarming. "What may prove your sincerity are visible changes. Start small and be transparent about every step, especially when it gets difficult." The room was silent, but he could sense a flicker of alignment. They were comprehending this wasn't just about him, but about constructing something together. Yet, underneath that mutual understanding, David felt a tremor. The foundational walls he'd built over the years were still in jeopardy of crumbling. What would happen when challenges emerged? Each revealing truth and impulsive decision would reshape his path. Could he withstand the scrutiny of his choices or collapse under the burden of authenticity? Just as intuition guided him, he felt another wave of tension approach. This was only the opening act to a much larger confrontation. Determined to seize this pivotal moment, David steeled himself to face not just the skeptical eyes before him but also the deep-seated fears lurking within. There was no turning back now. Transformation demanded more than intention, it required action veiled in unflinching honesty. As he contemplated the weight of those words, another thought surged. What if the hardest part of this journey would be confronting the doubts within himself? The threshold of change loomed before him, daring him to step through it, even as uncertainty hung like a storm cloud overhead. Would he embrace this pivotal journey or let his past dictate his future? The opener was here, but would the revelations lead him to fortitude or to undoing? The morning sun poured into David's office, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the room, each one a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The weight of expectation felt palpable, yet he knew he had to emerge from his cocoon. Today, he would convene the first open forum. The prospect made his heart race. Would they come ready to engage, or would skepticism drown the potential for fruitful dialogue? He could hear the faint echoes of the office coming alive, the clatter of keyboards, the rustle of papers, the chatter of colleagues catching up on their weekends. It felt like a distant rhythm, one he had long ignored as he'd focused on maintaining an image of control. But control was an illusion, he recognized now. Authenticity was the path forward, and he had to embrace the discomfort that came with it. With deep breaths, David rehearsed his opening remarks in his mind. He wanted to resonate with them, to let them know he was genuinely invested in real change. But how could he find the right balance between sincerity and vulnerability? Each consideration sparked a swell of anxiety, but he pushed it down. As the clock struck 10, employees began trickling into the conference room. David stood at the front, attempting to maintain a composed demeanor, though his internal monologue spun wildly. Laura settled into a chair near the front, her expression a mix of encouragement and scrutiny. The room soon filled, palpable with anticipation. He scanned their faces, some hopeful, some hardened by distrust. "Thank you for being here," David started, his voice steadier than he felt. "I understand that change means little without trust. Today, I want to open the floor to you. Share your thoughts, your grievances, your aspirations. I am here to listen." The silence that followed felt thick, as if they were collectively weighing their options. Then, a voice from the back broke through. "We've heard words like this before. How do we know it'll be different this time?" The question sliced through him, laying bare his trepidation. He had come with intentions of openness, yet here he was, facing the reality that words might not suffice. "I recognize the burden of skepticism," he said, hoping the sincerity in his tone was evident. "I can't expect trust when my past speaks against me. If you see changes in actions that genuinely consider your feedback, I hope to earn that trust. Let us start with you. What do you need?" Several voices erupted at once, overlapping dialogue spilling out words of frustration, agitation, and hope. David felt a rush of something he hadn't experienced in a while: connection. The more they spoke, the clearer their needs became: better communication, more preparation for workloads, and efforts to foster mental well-being among the team's psyche. Each comment chipped away at his fears, urging him to engage further. "David, it's not just about programs. It's about respect," Laura interjected, eyes fixed on him. "We need to believe that our thoughts matter." She was right. It wasn't enough to create initiatives, he needed to cultivate a culture rooted in respect. Suddenly, he felt a spark of insight. "Let us establish a committee," he proposed, drawing from the energy in the room. "An employee-led committee to oversee initiatives, an avenue for direct involvement. This way, your voices have not only influence but ownership." The idea ignited a buzz among the employees, a flicker of hope reigniting. But underneath that excitement lurked hesitation, he could sense it. What if we're not heard again? What if this too becomes a failure? David felt the weight of the fear, the kind that had shadowed him for far too long. It was a mirror, reflecting his own doubts about authority, capability, and whether he was truly meant for this role. As the forum continued, conversations evolved, ideas bounced around, and a sense of community began to take root. But amidst the optimism simmered a persistent dread. Was it enough? Were his efforts too little, too late? And what would happen when the inevitable pitfalls emerged in there? Collaboration. Would he have the courage then to stand firm, to listen and adapt? As the session drew to a close, David realized that his journey had only begun. This was just one of many conversations to come, and with every word shared, new layers of his leadership were being peeled back. Could he maintain this momentum? Would he be resilient enough to weather the storms that lay ahead? The room erupted in applause as he concluded the meeting, yet within him, a new tension thrived. The real test wasn't just about implementing change, it was about finding a way to consistently show up, learning through mistakes while building trust from the ground up. As he gathered his notes, Laura approached him again, her eyebrows knitted together in thought. You're on the right track, but remember, action matters. When the tough decisions come, will you still listen? The question hung in the air, a challenge and a promise, and it left him in a state of questioning. Would he be able to embrace that challenge, or would the lessons from his past cloud his journey ahead? With Laura's words echoing in his mind, David stepped out of the room, a renewed sense of determination flooding through him. The stakes had been raised, and the invitation to genuine leadership had been laid before him. Would he seize it, or would doubts overshadow his resolve once again? David paced his office, the echoes of the forum still resonating in his mind. He felt both exhilarated and exhausted, a mixture that left him lightheaded yet grounded. In that room, amidst the cacophony of ideas and fears, he glimpsed the opportunity to reshape his leadership not through authority but through humility. Yet, he recalled Laura's pointed question: action mattered. How would he translate this connection into concrete change? As he settled at his desk, he picked up a pen, preparing to draft his plan. What initiatives could he propose that showed immediate commitment? He thought about the committee he had suggested. It felt like a promising step, yet was he ready to relinquish some control? Empowering others would mean stepping back from the limelight, exposing his uncertainties. His fingers hovered over the notepad, still, as uncertainty simmered within him. 2 hours later, with his thoughts still bouncing between ideas and fears, David decided to meet with Laura again. She had been a grounding force throughout his tumultuous journey, and now, more than ever, he needed someone to challenge his emerging perspective. The openness he had encouraged during the forum must translate into his own practice, and Laura could push him to hold himself accountable. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he called out as he found her at her desk, busy sorting through a stack of reports. She looked up, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He took a seat across from her, battling the thoughts flying through his head. "I wanted to revisit the committee idea. I feel like I need to define what this actually looks like. What are the boundaries, the roles, and how to truly empower everyone involved?" Laura nodded, a knowing smile forming on her lips. "The more you define it, the more control you'll exert, David. This must emerge organically if it's to work." "That's where I struggle," he admitted, the admission feeling like a weight lifted. "I'm used to commanding outcomes. It's unsettling to think of letting things unfold without direct oversight. Leadership isn't just about steering the ship, it's about allowing others to navigate as well. Trust is built on both sides, but you need to model that trust first," she replied, her words a gentle prodding into the depths of his doubts. As Laura spoke, he realized she was right. If he wanted them to feel secure, he had to truly let go. But that didn't mean he had to be absent. He could guide without controlling. The committee could become a platform for learning, not merely an operational sounding board but a space of genuine collaboration. "Okay, so let's draft a proposal." David's tone shifted slightly, energized by the newfound clarity emerging from the conversation. "We can outline the responsibilities but also emphasize autonomy, encouraging the team members to lead the discussions." The moment sparked a feeling of awakening within him, ideas began to flow effortlessly. The prospect of an employee-led initiative evolved in his mind. Could this foster not just communication but mutual respect and ownership? Laura leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "I believe you're on the right track, but ensure you're ready for the questions that will arise. What happens when there are disagreements or when voices aren't equally heard? His stomach clenched slightly, exposing the raw truth of Laura's observation. I guess that'll be the real test of my character and our growth. With the afternoon fading, David and Laura spent hours drafting the framework for the committee. They envisioned roles, communication channels, even strategies for conflict resolution. Each component felt more like design thinking than rigid planning, and he found himself invigorated by the potential of this collaborative approach, but as he pinned down details, an uncomfortable thought crept into his mind. What if he put forth this proposal, but it fell short of expectations? What if himself, the committee members, and ultimately the entire team got caught in a cycle of unmet expectations and disappointment? He needed to address that fear head-on. It was no longer just about generating ideas, it was about cultivating resilience, acceptance of failures, and fostering a culture that could own its mistakes. He wasn't just facilitating a change, he was preparing for a journey with unpredictable terrain. Before he left for the day, he made a decision. It was time to share this evolving plan openly, to invite further input and encourage even deeper participation before launching into execution. As he walked back to his desk to wrap up for the evening, his thoughts churned with a sense of urgency. Was he truly prepared for the backlash that might come with vulnerability? He would need more than just words this time. He'd need fortitude to navigate the murky waters of uncharted territory. Exiting the office, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The journey ahead teemed with a blend of hope and fear. Yet, buried amidst that uncertainty was a flicker of determination. He would distance himself from past failures and entrench himself in this opportunity for transformation, but at the forefront of his mind loomed the very question that haunted him: would his resolve withstand the tests he had yet to face? David arrived at the office the next day with a dual sense of anticipation and anxiety. He had settled on the foundation of his plan, but now it was time to wade deeper into the water. Would revealing his ideas to the rest of the team reveal his vulnerabilities or deepen their respect for him? His heart raced as he entered the building, the humming of machines and the rustle of papers setting a backdrop to his growing uncertainty. Gathering the team for a meeting felt pivotal. David recalled the words of Laura echoing in his mind: trust is built on both sides. If he was to model vulnerability, he had to commit without reservations. But the thoughts that flickered through his mind were incessant, reminding him of everything that could go wrong. What if the team questioned his credibility? What if they felt undermined or, worse, indifferent? He summoned each member to meet in the conference room, his palms clammy as he prepared to speak. When everyone settled, he cleared his throat, heart pounding like a wild drum in his chest. Thank you all for coming, he began, forcing a professional tone through the tremble in his voice. I've been reconsidering our approach to collaboration here. Watching their expressions, he sensed mixed reactions. Curiosity, apprehension. It was like surveying a battlefield before the first strike. I want to propose an employee-led committee, he continued, forcing himself to meet their eyes, shifting from one face to the next. This space would be yours to define projects, share concerns, and engage in discussions that matter. A murmur of conversation buzzed around the room as some exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. David felt the prick of sweat on his brow. He knew this was no ordinary proposal, it was an invitation to share power. He pressed on: I want you to take ownership of your roles, voice your ideas and concerns. This is about reshaping our culture together. Rachel, a perceptive member of the team, raised her hand. And what's in it for you, David? Why would you want to give up some control? The question hit him like a jolt, sparking an anxiety he had expected but couldn't easily process. The room fell silent, all eyes now on him. He could dismiss her or reinforce his stance. But he had promised himself authenticity. It's about fostering a true environment of trust and collaboration, he replied. I've recognized that being effective isn't merely about leading, it's about allowing you to lead as well. Conflicting thoughts surged through his mind as he stood there, grappling with his own definitions of leadership. Would they believe his intentions? Or would they merely see this as a veiled attempt at control? Wouldn't it just lead to chaos? Greg interjected, arms crossed. How do we manage disagreements without you guiding us? Great question, Greg. That's precisely why we need to establish foundational principles within the group, David replied, inwardly calculating the wave of pushback he was receiving. We could create strategies for conflict resolution, allowing all voices to be heard. The discussion deepened. They began to question the logistics, express hopes, delineate fears. Every word uttered put David under the magnifying glass of scrutiny. He wanted to respond with confidence but felt the pressure of every anxious heartbeat. This was not merely a professional shift, it was a test of character. As he moved through the conversation, a revealing moment unfurled. Each challenge from the team trained their focus on him but also on themselves. They responded with hesitation and doubt that mirrored his own. Suddenly, the dialogue shifted. They were formulating solutions amongst themselves, illustrating a glimpse of the collaboration he envisioned. David leaned into this potential. Ideas flourished, optimism brewed. Yet, despite their enthusiasm, he couldn't shake the anxiety that shadowed him. The hovering question of failure loomed as he recognized the mantle of accountability he was now setting upon himself. As the meeting closed, the air of uncertainty had transformed into an electrifying charge of possibility, creating a hope he hadn't anticipated. However, David also felt the impending trials approaching like billowing storm clouds. Would this fresh approach to leadership fray under pressure? Would they embrace it or reject him entirely? Before he left the conference room, an unsettling sensation gripped him. He understood that they could still veer off course with every decision made. The very course he had charted could offer unexpected turbulence. But he would need to trust not just them but himself. Gathering his notes, David felt a pressing weight settle on his chest. This was merely the beginning of a more intricate design. He would need to fortify his resolve, armed with both courage and humility. As the path ahead blurred with uncertainty, with determination, he headed back to his office, yet a chilling awareness gnawed at him. What if succeeding in building trust meant facing the very truth of what he really feared, his own limitations? The moment had come to grapple not just with the team's growth but with confronting the leader he was bound to be. The next test loomed large, a relentless reminder that every true evolution demanded confronting uncomfortable truths. Would David be ready when the moments of truth arrived? David Miller stood in the boardroom, a sea of faces reflecting cautious optimism mixed with skepticism. The committee concept he introduced had gained traction, and each member chattered with ideas, illustrating the power of collaboration that had been so lacked before. Yet, today wasn't merely about pitches or plans, it was a defining moment of personal accountability. What's your personal stake in this? Laura's challenge from a month ago echoed vividly in his mind. It stung, yet it sparked a resolve that had been dormant, urging him beyond abstract initiatives toward authentic connection. He took a deep breath, prepared to take the leap that his vulnerability demanded. I am here to share something personal, David began, his voice steadier than his racing heart. I want to tell you why this matters to me. My journey has been one of ambition, profit, and cold numbers. His gaze shifted around the room, absorbing the earnest expressions. Yet all that has cost me the very essence of who I am: a son, a brother, an uncle, and a leader who has both disregarded your lives and hurt those he loves. The room held its breath. He dug deeper. I fired Ruth without regard for the consequences. Her struggles have trickled down to you. What I viewed through a corporate lens was a family in turmoil. Tremors of realization coursed through him. This was more than an organizational separation, it heralded the potential for reconnection. The response from his team was immediate and raw. Laura's eyes now sparkled with understanding. She saw a glimpse of the man hidden behind the CEO mask. It takes courage to admit that, she said, her voice steady. But this isn't enough. You need to show initiative, not just give words to it. The flood of ideas sparked a new conversation, one beyond mere policy changes. They brainstormed initiatives that didn't only bolster morale but that could redevelop a family-like culture within the company. Ideas rambled across the table, from mentorship programs to community outreach and skill enhancements for employees, all rooted in restoration. Later, as David left the boardroom, he reflected on the transformations born of vulnerability. This newfound frame was not just a facade, it was built on shared experience and mutual respect. He felt a shift in his spirit, reclaiming values long overshadowed by his relentless pursuit of capital. His journey took on a new hue, one of authenticity, where relationships mattered more than revenues. One evening, weeks after the initial committee meeting, David visited Ruth's home, armed not with the intention of salvage but of reconnection. It was time to face the consequences of his estrangement head-on. As she opened the door, their eyes met, and something unsaid hung in the air, a trauma that needed addressing. "Ruth," he began, holding her gaze firm but gentle, "I'm here not just to apologize. I want to invite you back on your terms, not as a mere employee, but as a partner in reshaping our work culture. Let us build something that values you and every employee." Ruth's brow furrowed slightly, skepticism flashed in her expression, but a flicker of hope stirred beneath the surface. "You think I could trust you after everything?" she challenged, yet the need for change mirrored his own. "I can't erase the past, but I can forge a path where mistakes learned drive us forward. It's time we rebuilt our relationship based on trust, respect, and mutual endeavor." A moment hung between them. The silence enveloped them, bridging the years of conflict and pain. Finally, her resolve cracked, and the glimmer of possibility etched her features. "Okay. But I won't sugarcoat it, and this will take both of us working to create something real." Concrete agreements didn't materialize through empty promises, they arose from shared labor and understanding. David felt the burden ally lifted. The chance to rebuild was not just for Ruth, but for himself. His journey henceforth was no longer about individual triumph, but about weaving openness into the fabric of the workplace, cultivating sustainable trust. As he returned to the office that next day to enormous progress reports, he began to notice the perceptible changes. Employees engaged with more motivation. Conversations shifted from terse exchanges to shared aspirations, painting a promising image of collaboration and unity. David stood before the window, the skyline of Silicon Valley nestled beneath the vibrant glow of the rising sun, and in that moment, he recognized something powerful. Change isn't merely about redesigning a boardroom or reshuffling employees. True transformation starts from within and radiates outward. He had emerged not only as a CEO rebuilt but as a leader reborn, one who placed people above profit, redefined success, and reclaimed his life. This moment of realization surged within him as a potent force, a recognition that he had conquered the rift created by his ambition. Once paralyzed by excess and self-imposed disconnection, he now stood confident, committed to fostering an environment of collaboration and respect. Finally, full circle, he was becoming a leader his employees could truly trust. This was not the end, but merely a new beginning, a chance to fully live the values he intended to champion, one day at a time. If you enjoyed this powerful conclusion, you need to subscribe now to the channel, so you don't miss out on the next emotional stories. Leave a like now to help the algorithm spread these inspiring tales. Your support matters. Comment below with your reactions and theories about David's journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation.